Well, I wonder if I could welcome now to the stage our next panellists and presenters, Geoffrey Conaghan, Ewa Kuriata, Karen Berkley and Mr. G.S. Narayanaswamy. And we're now going to look at the role of Australia and Indian state governments. Geoffrey Conaghan is the new... Actually, he's not new at all. What am I saying? He's a commissioner to India since December 2009. Previously a senior executive at Melbourne Airport and involved in corporate affairs, international airline and so on. But prior to that, held various positions in the vocational education and training sector with Tourism Training Australia and travels extensively through Asia, Europe and the Middle East, so brings a great deal of experience to bear. Mr. Narayanaswamy is Secretary to the Government of Karnataka, and in the Labor Department. He's held several very senior positions there. He's now Secretary in the government, and he is in charge of a great deal of advice giving on employment and training in the Department of Factories and Boilers, Labor Commissioner and Employees State Insurance Corporation, and again brings a great deal of experience working at this particular level. Karen Berkley is Executive Director of VETASSESS. How do you pronounce that, please? VETASSESS, got it, right. After 12 years, she was actually a teacher originally, but moved into the vet sector, and over the last 7 years as Executive Director has worked extensively with public and private sector organisations, both in Australia and internationally, on a range of projects in VET. She just interestingly working on a project with the Industry Training Authority in British Columbia in Canada to establish the Multiple Assessment Pathways MAP project in selected provinces across Canada. And finally, Ewa Kuriata, who is Manager of Education at the Department of Business and Innovation in Victoria, that state that is in the news of late here. She's the TEPI team, the Trade Engagement Program India team, recently organised that very big journey to India, the Super Trade mission to India led by the Victorian Premier, the Honourable Ted Baillieu, which was the largest ever trade mission to any market with 300 delegates from over 200 Victorian organisations. So no doubt she has gained a great deal on that. So I'm going to ask them all to discuss their experiences and again try to keep them, if they will, because it's between them and lunch, to 5 minutes. So Geoffrey, over to you first.
Unfortunately, Mr. Narayanaswamy had to pull out yesterday, but that note didn't get through to you. And I'll be making comments about who does the lifting and who does the work in collaborative projects at the end of this short presentation. So just as an introduction, this is the state government collaboration section of this program. India and Australia understand each other because we have a federal system. So I represent the state of Victoria. For those people who don't know, there are 5 of the 6 states have individual representation offices in India. I think there's only one other country, China, that has similar density of both state and federal Australian government representation. All up, we have, between federal and state, I think now 17 offices across India. So, our office, the Victorian Government Business Office, was established in 2006, and it was underpinned by a generic state-to-state memoranda of understanding that was signed in 2005. So this is now an established relationship of 7 years. We are located in Bangalore, in the state of Karnataka, with whom we have the memorandum, but we serve all of India. So while we represent the state government, my head of education, Annie Santhana, who will be known to many people today, she represents Victoria in the education space in India. And the relationship obviously works across federal lines, and our working relationship with Dr. Peter Nolan, who was the most senior education officer at the Australian High Commission in New Delhi, is what I would call very sound. So I think there's a great deal of cooperation, but certainly India is a big enough market where we don't get in each other's way. And we work not to get in each other's way and start doing one another's projects. So That's a little bit of the background. In 2010, we signed a specific vocational education and training agreement with the state of Karnataka that outlined collaboration in the vocational sector. So that was between the Government of Victoria, Government of Karnataka. I think it's important that, and I'm reiterating what some other people have referred to, it's about a presence and building relationships in India. We've had 4 skills missions, skills specifically, from Victoria to India since 2006. And I did a count up before I left. 19 visits by Victorian premiers. In India, they're called chief ministers. Ministers, parliamentary secretaries, or in India, ministers of state, and the secretary of the department and the chief secretary, so the head public servant. From Victoria, a total of 19 since 2006. So as you can see, Victoria takes this relationship seriously. And as Geraldine referred to, the February 2012 trade mission of 210 companies, 300 delegates, 7 cities, 9 sectors, 16 days, and we didn't lose anybody, which is quite remarkable. Even my Indian colleagues said we'll never pull this off, but we did. Anyway, so that's the background of the initiative that my colleagues will be talking about. In terms of issues, and I'm going to be really blunt here and tell it as it is, we have found that we've done 90% of the lifting in this relationship. And I'll be referring to that a little later on about how we're going to handle our future activities. We are, and I refer back to my colleague Annie Santhana, has certainly been the conceptual driver behind the vocational skills and education relationship and this project that will be described, and also in terms of coming up with the material effort. So conceptual and material effort basically means we've come up with the ideas and we've done most of the work. That's not going to happen as we move the relationship forward. We've also been faced by the challenge of moving senior bureaucrats. I've been in the office for 2.5 years and I have worked with 4 vocational commissioners in the state of Karnataka in that 2.5 years. So we've found that a continuity of people in their senior roles has been quite difficult because we have to re-educate. One particularly good vocational commissioner spent 6 months only in the role. So we found that quite challenging. There's also what we describe as a lack of collaboration, a lack of clarity on foreign collaborations, and it's about a framework for working with foreign organisations. So while we've had to adapt, of course, any partnership means both people come towards the centre. So I think both groups have to organise themselves to find a common ground. So they're the issues that we have faced in this project. In terms of where we're going, on the 2012 mission, our Premier made 2 major funding announcements for education. One was the second edition of the Victorian India doctoral scholarships aimed at a research level. The second was a first announcement of a $1 million vocational education and training fund to be undertaken between Victoria and Indian partners. Now that is getting rolled out at the moment. So what we're looking for to fund these projects, and this project that will be described to you, the Train the Trainer vocational project, was our launching pad. We're going to be looking at project partners that present us with the path of least resistance and maximum cooperation, particularly in the area of conceptual and material effort. So it's going to be a 50-50 deal on how we work together. The other thing, of course, is that we're going to look to the adherence of strict timelines in the delivery of these projects. While, I've spent 2.5 years in India, and people tell me that India operates at a different pace. No, it doesn't. I mean, I've worked on projects with Indian partners that get things done in a really timely fashion, They don't short-circuit quality, but they have quantity and quality outcomes, and they're delivered in timelines. I think it's about both partners' toleration point for how long a project should take. So this whole notion of you have to expect different time outcomes because of the way Indians operate, I would say no, both parties have to have clear expectations at the beginning of how they're going to deliver this project. So without further ado, that's a snapshot of where we've come from, what we've done in this particular project, and what our expectations are of moving forward. The project that's about to be described, I think, has had great outcomes. We could have done it in half the time, and that's what we'll be aiming to do in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Geoffrey. As Geoffrey pointed out, there were certainly a lot of challenges in trying to get the projects up under the education agreement that we had with the government of Karnataka. In fact, it got to a point where I was absolutely at a loss and thought, look, maybe what we might need to do is actually look at other partnerships. So in discussion with the secretary of our department, he decided that maybe Maharashtra would be a better state to see if we could get involved with, particularly as at that point in time we were thinking about possibly setting up a government office in Mumbai. So the fact that Maharashtra had been mentioned, that got me thinking that the Conaghan Institute of TAFE already had an existing relationship with the government of Maharashtra. In fact, at that point in time, they already had 2 MOUs. The first MOU that Conaghan had signed with the government of Maharashtra was in 2008, and that was focused on delivering specific assessment services for the Australian General Skilled Migration Program. And under that agreement, they had set up assessment centres in Mumbai and Pune through Conaghan's specialist assessment organisation, VETASSESS. Not only that, they had a second MOU which was signed in 2010, and that was signed in Melbourne with the Victorian Minister at the time, along with the Maharashtra Minister for Higher and Technical Education, Mr Rajesh Tope. So that MOU provided a framework within which detailed education, research and training proposals could be developed. So at that time I thought, well, why not use that framework that Conaghan already had in place? The Minister had already been at the signing of the MOU. We had a bit of a relationship already with Minister Tope. Maybe that's the way to go. So the Maharashtra government also had identified the VET teacher training as a priority, and I knew that throughout various iterations with the Karnataka government, they had also said they wanted VET teacher training. So I thought, look, why not try and mould the two together and have the Karnataka project and the Maharashtra project done at the same time? There were obviously efficiencies. Maybe that could be the way to go. So I entered into some discussions with my colleagues at Conaghan Institute, and they notified me that not only had they got a very good relationship with the government of Maharashtra, but they had also started the accreditation process for a VET teacher training program, which would have recognition in India. So to me, I thought, look, all the ducks are lining up. This sounds like a perfect proposal. Why not go ahead with that? So the word kind of got around, and the Karnataka government, I think, heard about Maharashtra, and all of a sudden they said, yep, we want that as well. So that was certainly one way of getting them moving very quickly. So what we actually agreed with Conaghan VETASSESS was that it would be a project where we would deliver VET teacher training both in Karnataka and in Maharashtra, and it would be focused within the government ITIs. So Conaghan had a really unique insight as well with the VET teacher training, because through their assessment centres in Pune, they had been working with some Indian trainers, and they already knew what sorts of skills they needed, and they had sort of adapted a bit of a program for the local assessors within the assessment centres. So they had a real head start in this project, and all of those learnings were then incorporated into the program that we delivered. Conaghan also had some experienced staff that were working in India. In fact, they had local staff. So that was also something that made it a lot easier for me to finally roll it out. Also, the fact that they had the relationship with Maharashtra was a great opportunity for Victoria, because it heightened the opportunity for us to be able to profile the capability of Victoria. So it was really a win-win. We were able to get the projects up and happening, and also able to deliver some within Karnataka.
I think past speakers this morning have talked about the fact that Indian education is one that has really got a model of instructive teaching and not so much practical skills, certainly in the ITIs. We, from our experience, understand that there's terrific teachers there, but the model that they often use is not one that's going to be suitable for a modern India and for skilling up industry. We in Australia have, as people have mentioned, a terrific vet sector, but it hasn't always had been modelled around the way it is now. And it was once very much a curriculum-based. It's now very much about industry skills development and ensuring that graduates have demonstrable skills and knowledge that can be directly applied in India. And so our challenge in this program was to design a program that would enable Indian trainers to experience some of that, I guess, that thinking and that modelling. And we tried to do it in a very short time frame, I might add. We had to deliver to basically 95 different institutes in Karnataka. And we did try to customise it so that we drew on what was required in that Indian context within the ITIs. And we also knew that the program, because it was one that was being funded by the state government, and I think had so much riding on it, that it needed to be well evaluated and well documented. So we were conscious all the time of meeting timelines and budgets, as well as ensuring that all stakeholders were, really well involved throughout. Through the program, as Eva said, we actually got it accredited, and it was accredited by the State Councils for Vocational Training in both Maharashtra and Karnataka. And its aim was, as I said, to train vet teachers in India to use competency-based practices in both training and assessment. And it used a number of delivery modes. We used face-to-face teaching for 2 weeks, where we actually had the participants working with Australian trainers. And then we also looked at work-based activities and a mentoring program following that, which went on for about 4 weeks, so that trainers worked very closely with their students, their ITI trainers, to ensure that follow-up practical activities could be then used in the workplace and that people could get feedback on their performance. We wanted to model some of the important aspects of competency-based training and assessment. So we tried to ensure that the program had a lot of very practical activities, a lot of discussion, a lot of teamwork, and I think that was, some of the aspects that participants found the most enjoyable, the most rewarding, and enabled them to then, I think, become better teachers after that, though I'm obviously reserved about saying that because the time, this needs to be sort of demonstrated over time. But certainly they reported a lot more engagement with their students and the students with their learning. I've just got an overview of the program objectives, which were really to look at how you plan a learning program, write learner-centred, activity-based session plans, and that's what skills development, I think, in Australia is about. It's really trying to capture learner-centred teaching and training, ensuring flexibility, assessment only, RPL pathways towards learning as well are important. And being able to ensure that teachers are collecting feedback on their performance and managing their own professional competence so that there's that continuous learning. They're the sorts of objectives that were delivered through this program. The target audience were experienced teachers. They were from the automotive, engineering, electrical, building and construction, and the information technology sectors. What's, again, very interesting and different from Australia is that in Australia, teachers in those trade areas are teachers who have actually practiced in the industry and have worked and understand very well and have developed skills in automotive if they're talking about, fixing brakes, or if they've worked in ITIs and they might have been programmers if they're teaching it. in India, again, because of the status of the trades, unfortunately, there's that disconnect. And so the people that are often training don't have that direct experience often of the trades. So I think one of the things that we've felt coming out of that is that there perhaps needs to be more collaboration, certainly more team work in terms of delivering a lot of industry programs, whether directly with industry and in workplaces, as some of the programs that have been described earlier today have undertaken, or whether it be actually having more tradespeople working in ITIs and assisting teachers in developing some of those skills with their students. We actually went through and delivered to 125 teachers from Karnataka, and as I said, 95 people. I'll just skip through it and perhaps talk about some of the lessons that we learnt. It's really important to understand the Indian culture and the local VET context. It's also important not to rely on technology. We're very blessed here with lots of technology, and not only that, you know, really good resources in our TAFE institutes and our private sector training. While that is certainly the case in some sectors in India, it wasn't in the areas that we taught. And it was very hard for teachers to go back into their institutes and to be able to really sometimes deliver some of the things that we were talking about, because the technologies weren't always there, and it's also extremely expensive and the resources are not always there. And there's also, again, as I said, this major paradigm shift that I think people are really willing and certainly able to do, but is going to take time and resources to move from a basically curriculum-based delivery mode to one which is competency-based and very much industry-driven. And secondly, that teachers do require ongoing support. We were able to give them 4 weeks through the practicum. They found that really interesting and really helpful, because they could then put things into practice and get feedback and get ongoing coaching. But of course, what we're hoping that those people perhaps undertake further training in the future and become master trainers, so that they can then assist the other teachers within their institutes. That's one of the major goals of this program. We're also looking at the need for, I guess, I've talked about change being dependent on time and resources. Just some of the success factors, and I'm going to finish. Thank you, Geraldine. It's really important to ensure that there are strong relationships and communication maintained with all stakeholders, and that everybody does understand their roles. It's important because most of these projects, as I said, do have limits on resources and they have limits on time, and so to ensure that everything keeps moving and that your outcomes are achieved, you do need to ensure that all the time you are constantly talking. It was great to have Annie and Geoffrey in India working with our Indian team. It was certainly one of the major success factors, as was, I think, you know, the terrific participation of all the ITIs and the industry trainers. Listening and responding to clients' needs. The program was changed quite a lot to ensure that it went through the accreditation process, and that was really important as well. And it means now that people are actually going to achieve some sort of recognition for that program. Strong project management is really important. I think I've talked about that. The partnership model of delivery is one that we certainly would attest to. We think it's terrific with all of those other provisions included. And transparency and openness at all times. If there is a problem, that you address it, that it can be talked about, and that it's not, you know, swept under the carpet. That's also really important. And just secondly, we work, as I said, around the world, but we also work a lot in Australia, and we have an office here in Perth. Just the whole idea of the trades and how important they are to the Australian economy and also to the Indian economy. I mean, we've talked about that. It's so important, I think, that we try and ensure that people understand in India and in Australia as well just how critical it is. We know now in Australia with the mining resource boom and how important it is to ensure that we have skilled workers to be able to ensure that we meet that, that requirement. But I think that, again, in those ITIs, if those teachers and students can understand, again, the importance of the trades and the tremendous opportunities that are available, that'll be, you know, great. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Geoffrey, Ewa and Karen. I'm sorry, I just didn't see this as I'm processing so many people, I just didn't see Mr. Narayanaswamy's absence. But that adaptability, my gosh, it rolls off the tongue easily, but just hearing the way in which that had to be applied on the ground has been terrific, I think, to hear.